Hello, Stacy.
Hi, Nadine.
Okay, let's see who we have here on board. We're still missing a whole bunch of folks. I don't see them on the list. Okay. Okay, Cindy. I see Cindy.
Hi.
And Suresh. Okay, so we have a quorum then. All right, we got 2 minutes and we'll start. Hey, Marissa. Hey, Jaime.
Hey.
Okay, Suzanne is going to be out tonight. Cindy. Okay, we got 30 seconds and we have, let me verify, okay, with Suresh, I see your name. There you are, perfect, we have quorum, perfect. So in about 10 seconds, we are ready to start. And good evening, everyone. It is 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, September 29th. It is September Complete Streets Commission's meeting. Welcome, everyone. I know that the city staff is there. I saw Marissa and Jaime, so hello. And with that, we have at least 4 commissioners that I can see. And let me make sure that we have others. If you are a commissioner, please turn your video on so we can establish your presence. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. We have quorum. I see our vice chair, Energy. Actually, I see number 5, perfect, or more maybe. I see Commissioner Yang, and I see Commissioner Venkatraman, and I see Tom, and okay, perfect. We do have more than quorum actually, when we have also Steve there. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Suzanne is going to be out tonight. So with that, as usual, we'll take 20 seconds to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in private. All right. So again, welcome everyone. The format as usual is we start with for public comments on items not on the agenda. And I'm going to repeat, for items not on the agenda. If you want to speak on items that are related to the master's plan, you're going to have to wait until that shows up at 7:15. Until then, I'm going to open up the floor for any comments from the members of the public on items not on the agenda. If you wish to speak, that's your chance. Please raise your hand or just speak up your name.
This is South Los Altos. John?
Okay. All right, John, go ahead.
Hi, I've spoken to you about the intersection of Fremont Avenue at Austin. On Friday, a week and a half ago, sure enough, there was a vehicle pedestrian accident at that intersection. I called the police to ask if I could get a copy of the police report. They said, no, they don't release them. I asked, do you release them to the Complete Streets Commission? And they said, no. And I asked, do you release them to city staff traffic engineer? And I was thinking of Jaime, and they said, no. And I said, why? And they said, privacy concerns. Of course, that begs the question why they can't redact out all personal identifying information. Frankly, I do not see how you guys can do the job you've been appointed to without getting information on traffic accidents involving pedestrians or bicycles, which are of course the subject of complete streets, without getting information on such accidents that have actually happened. And by the way, this pedestrian was removed by emergency vehicle from the site of the accident. I think some kind of reform is desperately needed here. All you can do is imagine where accidents might happen and try to prevent them rather than dealing with where they've actually happened. Okay, I've gone on too long. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Anyone else who wishes to speak on items not on the agenda? All right, I don't see anyone. So with that, we're gonna move forward with the agenda items. And the first one is the meeting minutes in the last August 25th meeting. And I hope you guys had the chance to look at the minutes. Okay, any comments from the commission?
Yeah, the
Tom, go ahead.
where I had to make the correction before, which is fine, listed that, but he made the same error again, the wrong day of the week on the very top of the minutes. So it's listed as Thursday, but it was a Wednesday.
Yep. All right, correction noted. Cindy?
Yeah, it lists me as absent, but it also puts me in the present section. So I need to be removed from the
Okay.
present section.
Well, you can be in both places at the same time, no? All right, okay, so do I see any motion with the amendments, or at least with amendments? Suresh, go ahead. Are you muted?
Thank you, Chair. I had a question. On the VMT policy, we did approve the policy. And I was wondering, would that not be noted in the meeting minutes?
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Let me ask
that the VMT portion was approved, and then we decided to do a bit more work on the other portion, and so that is underway. But we can note that more clearly in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Great, so we have 3 corrections, amendments. Any further comments, by the way, or corrections? Okay, can anyone support a motion with the amendments? Steve, go ahead.
I second it.
No, I'm asking for a motion. There is not a motion to second yet. Somebody needs to
I
put
didn't
forth
know
a
that we
motion.
approved the minutes, actually.
Yeah, I need the motion with the amendments. Wow, can I serve you coffee?
I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes pending the 3 amendments just spoken.
Okay, and can we just state them, please? First one is correcting Cindy's presence.
Second is changing the dates and then adding the approval of the VMT policy to item number 4.
Great. Any comments on the motion? Okay, very well. Any seconds? Steve, there's your chance.
Can I second it for the second time?
All right, you get the second for the second time. Great, all in favor? I'm gonna go around. Okay, raise your hand. It's easiest actually, just count hands and just say names. Okay, Steve, I guess you wanna raise your hand? Right, okay, perfect. So we got 5 yays and then Cindy is abstaining. I guess you were not present, that's why, right? Okay, great. All right, Marissa, we have that noted, right?
We do.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we move to the next item, which is the first project review in a while, and that is the 349 First Street. And I suppose Sean is going to lead that. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Let me,
Go ahead.
Thank you. Let me do my presentation in a second. Okay, good evening, Chair Maloof and commissioners. My name is Sean Gagos. I'm an associate planner in the planning division. Here we go. The item before the Complete Streets Commission is a pre-submittal application for development at 349 First Street. It is a 4-story multifamily development with 12 residential condominium units with 1 level of ground level parking with a parking lift. The subject site is zoned commercial downtown multifamily. As shown on the map, it is directly behind it is commercial downtown. Directly across the street is the CRS district. Currently, the site is occupied by a 3,000 square foot, 2-story commercial building with office uses. Along Whitney Street, there is a driveway leading to 14 on-grade parking spaces directly behind the building. The on-site vehicle circulation includes a driveway, again, in a similar location as the existing driveway entrance along Whitney. Under the provisions of the density bonus regulations, the project is pursuing a reduction in the parking standards from the city standard of 26 parking spaces, which would be required, to 17 parking spaces. This is not considered a density bonus concession or waiver, but is a standalone reduction per the density bonus law. For the site, trash is being proposed collected along the alley. The applicant has not conveyed or provided in the plan set a location for a trash pickup as a requirement per the CDR3 ordinance. Dedicated pickup area is required along the alley. That was noted to the applicant. And so we're looking to potentially see that responded to in a future formal application. The closest bus stop to this site is about 0.2 miles from the subject site. And it's at the corner of Lyle and San Antonio. It is a very relatively short distance. The route is for local VTA Route 40, which provides service to Foothill College and over to Mountain View. The simplest form of access is down Whitney Street and or down First Street, down San Antonio. As recommended by the VTA guidelines, the project will be required to provide a minimum, meet the minimum standards per VTA guidelines, which include a Class 1 bicycle locker plus, which must be provided for every 3 units, and 1 Class 2 bike rack, which must be provided for every 15 units. As indicated in the plan, since these are preliminary, the applicant did not include bicycle parking or bicycle storage. However, staff has advised that they are to comply with the VTA standards and will be a requirement in order to move forward. If approved by council, the applicant will be required to improve the sidewalk along First and Whitney to create an accessible path to travel per the Americans with Disability Act, and they will also provide new curbs and gutters and ADA access at the corner. Class 2 bicycle lanes are provided on San Antonio Road with closed access provided again off of Whitney Street or First Street. The project is coming under an SB 330 application under California Senate Bill 330, the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. There are 2 key phases, the pre-application phase and the formal submittal phase. The purpose of this pre-submittal phase is to collect specific site and project information in order to determine the zoning, design, subdivision, and fee requirements that are going to apply to this housing development. During the formal submittal phase, the city is only allowed to have a maximum of 5 meetings. Legislation was written very broadly to include community meetings and study sessions. in this definition. This is the central reason why we are conducting these preliminary meetings, because they are outside of these 5 meeting thresholds. The city, in considering the 5 meeting thresholds, must take in consideration any potential appeals that may occur. And as such, it's critical that the Complete Streets Commission and the community provide feedback during the study session meetings so the applicant can respond to comments made by the community. As a result, beyond this pre-submittal application meeting, once we have a formal application, the planning division and the city will be conducting a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Complete Streets Commission. And that will occur once a formal application is submitted. Again, that's paramount to try to reduce the number of meetings so we can try to achieve a maximum of 5 meetings total. The city has, the planning division has already conducted with the applicant a community meeting, which has occurred on September 2nd. At that meeting, there were a total of 3 speakers. The primary comments were regarding design, issues of scale and bulk and form and architecture relationship to neighborhood, and the cohesiveness of the design, concerns regarding the elevator tower structure. Primary concerns relative to this commission is they were concerned regarding the reduction in parking spaces down to the 17 parking spaces. There was concern for a lack of visitor parking spaces that they felt the applicant should have provided in the submittal. Besides tonight's meeting, a planning commission meeting is scheduled to be held next week on October 7th. And this concludes staff's presentation, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Galgo. So I'm gonna open it up to the commission. Can we actually, could you please stop sharing the screen so we can see?
Oh, I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries, thank you. Thank you. Great, so I'm gonna open it up now to the commission for questions to the city or to the developer. I presume the developer is present?
The developer is present, and the developer is available to provide a presentation that they've prepared.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, let him go forth, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Annie Leong, the project designer for this project, part of Studio T Square. I'm also here with my colleague, Chuck Tang, which is also the principal of Studio T Square, and along with Nick Samuelson, the landscape designer for our project. So thanks, Sean, for the great introduction of our project. I'll keep this nice and short. So thank you everyone and city staff for being here tonight to review our project. We have received the constructive report and comments from the city staff and architect, and from the last community meeting that we're currently still reviewing, and it will be taken into consideration for the next submittal. As we're still in the preliminary stages of the project, we are looking forward to listening to everyone's feedback and to address them before our next planning submission. So a brief overview of the project is 4-story residential condominium building that's 46 feet tall in compliance with the city's base height plus density bonus height. A total of 12 units, and 2 out of 12 units will be below market rate units, with 1 live-work unit at the ground level. The existing use is a commercial building and parking lot, which will later be demolished and replaced. For the existing site conditions, the site is bounded by First Street at the front, Whitney Street on the right, and the alley at the back. Directly across First Street is the Draker's Market, and across the street from Whitney is another existing commercial building and parking lot, which is also a location of a newly proposed 4-story condominium project. Directly across from the alley is an older office building. And as we move down the street on Whitney towards 2nd Street, there are many other office buildings with the newer development of the Packard Foundation headquarters at the corner of 2nd and Whitney Street. There has been a lot of newly proposed neighborhood developments around the site. A lot of them are still under construction, with some of them already built. As previously mentioned, the closest project, the newly proposed project, is the 355 First Street project, which is right across the street from us on Whitney, It's also a 4-story condominium building project, very similar, much larger scale than our current building. And the next previously proposed project is the 376 First Street project, which is also very close to our project. Many of these newly development are very unique and has their own variety of architecture styles and material that enriches the neighborhood and the district. The project we're proposing will take in elements from the many proposed developments in the area, and we hope to create an infill project that directly complements its adjacent neighborhood with the use of warm materials and the style of architecture that's appropriate to surroundings. As previously mentioned in the site plan, we have our 1-level concrete parking garage located at the ground floor. The driveway entry is through Whitney Street and also aligns with the existing driveway across the street. Lining the first street is the lift work, which helps activate the street frontage, and also having a lobby next to it adjacent also promotes pedestrian flow. The trash room and electrical room is also located back for easier access to trash pickup days and any maintenance to occur. Due to our small and narrow site, we're using car lifts instead of underground parking to maximize the amount of parking we can provide. For the building floor levels, we have a mixture of large units with plenty of 2- and 3-bedroom units. Each unit has their own private deck space, and the building is set back from the street with a landscape buffer in between. The units peel back at First Street and step down on the upper floors to help break down the massing, which is lined with large balconies at the front. The common roof deck is also located at the highest level. These are the elevations of the 2 street frontages. The building is layered to help break down the massing and to give more emphasis on horizontality. There's a distinct base middle on top, with the top being recessed. We try to introduce smaller scale details to the building with the use of many articulations and recesses, such as glass balconies and canopies to create more depth and shadow lines. We also use warmer quality materials such as wood-like and porcelain tiles to enhance the facades. Moving on to the alley and side elevation, we took inspirations from the neighboring building and brought in a green wall to help screen and line the parking garage and to help create a landscape buffer at the pedestrians at street level. The elevation wraps around the corner from Whitney Street to the alley, and we wanted to address all sides of the elevations by adding articulation to the adjacent side wall with details and slight recesses. In our building section, you can see how the upper floor has been recessed back and is peeled back from the front of the First Street. And also the elevator and stair core helps create a hierarchy to help break down the roof line. Also in this section, you can see a glimpse of our garage sloping down towards the alleyway to create enough headroom for us to provide car lifts to provide more parking spaces. As for existing street conditions, here is an aerial view of how the commercial district flows down Whitney Street and onto First Street. Here are a few images of the existing streetscape conditions on our site. Located at the corner of First Street and Whitney Street, we can see a very narrow sidewalk directly adjacent to the existing building. The sidewalk, unfortunately, is not continuous and does not align with the office building down the street. There's no existing curbs located at our site. There are only 2 planter boxes that help separate the road and the property. There are 2 crosswalks located at the corner of our site. One of them on Whitney Street, and there's another one on First Street leading to Draker's Market. This crosswalk is located in the middle of First Street and could be dangerous for pedestrians to cross. As we're moving down Whitney Street towards 2nd Street, we can see how the intersection has been newly modified with bulb belts to increase the pedestrian experience and safety. We hope to take this into consideration and propose a similar idea for our project corner. Here are some early work in progress idea of the streetscape around our site. We wanted to create improvement to the existing streetscape, and we wanted to propose a similar idea down the street by having a bulb out at the corner to help slow down traffic speed and also make it more pedestrian and bike friendly. We wanted to create a better connection for the pedestrian experience by having a wider sidewalk that is continuous from the adjacent parcel, and also have a more continuous landscape area between the road and the sidewalk. Also, as mentioned earlier, this is our proposed driveway, which is made to align with the existing driveway across the street. And that was a quick overview of the project. I'm here to answer any questions and hear any feedbacks. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Leong. Okay, you could please stop sharing the screen, and then I'm gonna have commissioners ask you or the city staff any questions. Questions from the commission? Suresh, go ahead. Suresh?
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair. I had a few questions, either some for the city staff and some for the developer, for the design. So first, I'm trying to understand what was the justification for the parking bonus. Can you provide some more additional details surrounding that? The reason why I'm asking is specifically about concerns about what happens with spillover parking. You know, that is a small parcel, and I don't see, I mean, there's really no street parking around that area, and how that will be handled.
Sean, let me turn on my, Sean Gallegos, Associate Planner. So density bonus projects, or projects that qualify for the density bonus under state law and under the local local municipal code, qualifies for a reduction under the density bonus regulations, which does not encapsulate visitor parking. It is a reduced parking threshold, which provides 1.5 parking spaces for 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, 1 parking space for 1 bedrooms, which is a significant reduction from the city's standards, which does accommodate for visitor parking spaces. If under the city standard, we would have parking that should be provided that's a total of 26 spaces. But since the applicant, as a density bonus project, qualifies automatically for the standalone reduction, then the city would typically not require the visitor parking as part of that process.
Thank you. So I had a follow-on question regarding the parking itself. Inside the structure, the parking you said was a mechanical sort of a lift-based parking system. Can you specify how many of those are sort of the lift-based, and how them actually have or not that they have level normal parking spaces?
The applicant would be best to address that. The staff has not received any technical information on the lift structure at this stage.
Or how many spaces are in the lift structure and how many are outside?
Total of 9 spaces are in the lift structure. 8 spaces are provided at the grade level at the first floor. So total 17.
And then regarding the bike parking inside the structure, did I hear correctly that there is 1 bike locker for the whole unit?
So there's currently no bicycle parking provided on site.
This is just was this just a recommendation back from the city staff?
So in a pre-submittal application, staff's supposed to provide a list of all of the municipal code requirements and regulations and policies that are applicable. And as part of that, we conveyed to them the VTA requirements and advised them that they weren't complying with that requirement. So we expect for them to provide that parking at the formal submittal stage.
Okay, great. I had a question regarding the access to the waste at the back. What would be the access path for this particular development? Would that be through Widening and to the back alley?
That has not been conveyed. Again, in our pre-submittal response letter, we advise them that under the CDR3 district, there's a requirement for loading and unloading to occur from an alleyway when an alleyway is available along the backside of the property. We asked for clarification from them on how they were going to comply with the loading and unloading zone area, or whether they were going to pursue an allowance under the density bonus regulations for an exception to that. I don't have a response, and maybe the applicant could explain how they may service the trash for the site.
Yes, so it will be accessed through the alleyway for the trash, but for further details we'll provide it in our formal submittal set.
Okay, and I just had a general question for the staff. So for all the developments that are on First Street, I think one thing the commission might benefit from is understanding. I'll make it a question, but do you have something that, you know, what is the whole First Street going to look like from a pedestrian perspective? That is what is the continuity? Is that going to look? I mean, we're not getting a view of what that pathway might look like. Are they consistent? Are each of these developments doing something different? And what's the plan to sort of homogenize that?
I don't have an, I'm sorry to say I don't have an answer. Marissa, do you have a firmer grasp of the bicycle pathway plan that they have for the city? I can always get an answer for you and get back to you if you'd like. I can provide an email response, and to the commissioners, I can also provide that.
I don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, so Marissa, I think at one point in time in the past, there was some consideration of a streetscaping for First Street. We should resurrect that and sort of see how it fits in view of the developments that are being planned right now. Yeah, go ahead.
So as part of the pre-submittal response letter, we did, so in the pre-submittal response letter, it's a little different than an incompleteness letter where we're in a formal project submittal process. In the pre-submittal response letter, we provided them a list of the design policies and downtown policies that they're required to comply with. So we're expecting them in the formal submittal to respond to us how they're complying with each of those requirements in their formal submittal.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's the questions I had for now.
Steve, was it you or Tom? I can't remember. One of you was raising your hand.
It was me.
Tom, okay.
So several questions here. The recent pre-stage, you're talking about a bump out. Is that in part because you have a waiver for the setbacks from the street being reduced from 10 feet normally to 2 feet? Because that's going to reduce, you know, make it more difficult for anybody to get around, whether it's a bike or people walking. And is that waiver already been approved by the city, or who else? Or who else would have done that?
So the city has not had an opportunity to review that. We have seen examples of the bulb outs, for instance, at 897 North San Antonio Road as a pedestrian safety measure that was required under the Sherwood Gateway Plan. And so that's the most recent one I'm aware of, unless Jaime may be aware of it. So we do have examples of bulb outs, and many residents may have experiences with that bulb out, but we haven't had an opportunity to review it yet.
Commissioner, this is Check Tang. I'm a principal with Studio Square. I may take a crack at that question. It is, since we have limited, exposure to the commission, what we want to do is kind of get some maybe brainstorming idea of that street section in front of you, so that we can get some feedback. Given that the First Street sidewalk is fairly narrow, And then we're also conforming to the rest of the Whitney Street section. What we want to do is maybe at least throw out, we hope it will be a creative idea to kind of create a better pedestrian experience, also kind of slow down the traffic and allowing that crosswalk to the Draeger side to be a little bit more generous, because it's, you know, it's not necessarily really self-serving for a project. Really, if you look at all the ADA ramps on the current sidewalk, both crossing the First and Whitney, neither one of them are really in conformance. So what we're hoping to do is create a little bit more gracious crosswalk, and also a bit of a almost feeling like a street diet to make it more pedestrian and bike friendly. That was our intention.
Commissioners, this is Jaime from the Transportation Division. I just wanted to make a note also that the city staff in our transportation comments, we did also request the developer to look at a street improvement for bulb outs at this intersection. There's another project currently in the hopper right across the street from this site on the opposite corner, and we provided a similar request to them to provide some consistency at the intersection between the two improvement projects. And then at this specific location, we also asked this developer and the other developer to do a focused traffic analysis to determine if an always stop here would also be an appropriate measure to help kind of control bicycle, pedestrian, vehicular access at the intersection. So that improvement was coordinated through the city staff.
Thank you, Jaime. Tom, are you done with the question?
No, well, part of that question too was there was a waiver that was listed in the presentations about the setbacks being reduced from 10 feet to 2 feet. So there's not much room there from the building setback to the street. Has that actually been approved? And was that approved by the city, or where's the status of those setbacks?
So again, this is a pre-submittal application. They have not submitted a formal application. The request for the density bonus waiver to reduce the setbacks along the front from 10 feet to 2 and the rear from 10 feet to 2 have not been reviewed formally by any of the commissions or council yet. So it's not been approved yet.
Okay. Simply, there's 12 bedrooms listed in this complex. One of them is on the first floor, is a 1 bedroom, and you've listed it as live work. What is that really supposed to be? Because you're not listing it as a unit, but it is listed as a unit, a bedroom unit in your tables.
If I may just clarify, the reason why we took the kind of lesser setback on that street frontage is there's a difference in setback between the commercial spaces versus a residential space. And given, you know, the post-COVID world, that we believe there's actually a need for live work space. So what we're proposing on the ground floor, that unit on the ground floor in essence is a higher tall ceiling, 15-foot ceiling, kind of a live work space that really serve much more like a, you know.
Mr. Tang, you're breaking up. Can you please repeat that last sentence?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Let me put out my camera just in case the bandwidth. But what we're proposing, basically a live work space on that corner, given the post-COVID-19 kind of work from home, that we feel like that actually will be a very appropriate use. But the way we're looking at that is really a commercial, kind of a commercial live work type of condition. That's why we're calling that a live work unit.
So that means it won't be a bedroom unit anymore?
It will be more commercial. Basically, you can actually, you would have access, ADA access, that you could actually create a commercial space on the ground floor.
So that means you would reduce the thing from saying it's a 12-bedroom complex to 11-bedroom complex?
No, that would be classified as a commercial space. I mean, commercial live workspace.
So it would be listed as a 11-bedroom?
So Annie, you want to clarify that point?
So it'll still be 12 units, but the live work is considered 1 unit. Its live work is kind of like a half half unit and half commercial space, so still be considered towards the 12 unit mix.
And would that be considered the one of the reduced income units?
No, that's not the intention. Is that one of the living units will be part of the affordable units.
Have you guys designated which will be the low income or reduced income units?
We have not defined it yet, but I mean, our goal is to actually, have an equitable allocation of those affordable units within the project. So.
Okay, and then from the other meeting, there was some issues about the American Legion building next to it. There's a possibly historic site and their antenna. Has there been any, decisions on that, on those areas?
We have received that comment, and so we are actually, as part of our process toward the formal application, we are really doing due diligence on that comment. So.
Okay.
This is Steve Golden, senior planner. I just want to remind the commission that your comments really need to focus in on the multimodal transportation related issues of the project and not kind of get into other issues, because that's what your responsibilities are. So I would say you should probably just focus on those related issues.
Yeah, Steve, let me jump in here. I think recognize that, but I think those questions are very specifically tied to what ultimately could lead to transportation. Thank you for the note. Tom, go ahead with the questions, please.
That was it. I was done with those. So thank you for the time.
Great. Steve, go ahead. Steve, you're muted.
How's that?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question on the impact on the sidewalk on First Street as different than Whitney Street. First Street is pretty heavily trafficked by pedestrian traffic, and that is exacerbated by the people coming in and out of Drager's and people who tend to park on First Street and then come across the street to load and unload their groceries. And I was wondering I couldn't quite tell from the drawing that we saw. Is there any impact on the width of the sidewalk on First Street? And will there be anything that inhibits either pedestrian or bicycle traffic that goes by the building going down First Street and past it? And Sean, maybe you can either address that, perhaps.
Well, staff does not. So those particular issues were raised by the engineering divisions to provide for improvements to sidewalks, and we don't have a response from the applicant in the informal stage, so I couldn't answer that. Jaime, do you have a potential response in regards to street width and whether it may be impacted by the sidewalks?
So the only impact to the street width would be the installation of the proposed bulb out at the corner of the project, which would have a matching bulb out if the bulb outs were both approved with the project next door. But that bulb out would be limited to within the equivalent of the parking lane area. And so that wouldn't have an impact to the roadway. We already did provide comments on the transportation side as part of the initial review that we've done to look at possibly restricting parking along Whitney, right? Okay, hope we're getting the right side street name there, because it is limited in width and we can't provide parking on both sides of the street. So that was one of our initial comments, but that's still being worked out depending on the final plans for the project. There shouldn't be any specific impacts to the existing sidewalk zone. I don't believe we are widening the sidewalk zone from what it is in this area, but that's a question maybe, Steve, that you could answer. I don't believe it does.
And then the second question I have is there any, it looks from the drawing like the back of the building gets or the side of the building gets very close to the edge of the alleyway in the back. Does that constrain any large vehicular traffic or pedestrians walking on the side of the alley, on the side of that where the building is?
I'm not aware of any impacts to that. I have not reviewed or considered that, but I can always get an answer for you if you'd like and get back to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Suresh, I think your hand was up too. You have another follow-up question? Okay, great, thank you. I do, Cindy, I'm not seeing you raise your hand. Okay, great, sorry, just double check. I have a few questions. So first, let me understand the slip work comment. Are you suggesting that actually that could potentially turn into a commercial space? Or could be used by the buyer or the resident as for commercial purposes?
Yes, that is correct. That's our intention, is that, especially given the post-COVID world, work from home, that
how would that be accounted for in the calculations of parking in that case? How would you expect, let's say somebody set up a floral shop to work from home, how would that impact the parking?
So I think what we want to do is kind of look at also that as part of that state density bonus parking waiver. Given this is a downtown context and there are a lot of street parking, the intention is that to lessen the parking and the traffic count in downtown, but also allow for, because this is a walkable community, a lot of them, literally all the programs and amenities are right around within walking distance. So the intention is to kind of create a more walkable environment, because you do have quite a bit of street parking for commercial uses as well.
So staff would need to look into that. Typically, density bonus regulations apply for housing. We'll have to look at live workspaces aren't really defined in the city's use definitions for the CDR3 district, and they're not defined in the definition section. So we'll have to consider whether it does qualify as a commercial space or as a multifamily. If it did qualify potentially as a commercial space solely, then parking standards would apply. Office spaces are 1 per 300, which if this is a work, it would have to be resolved with further discussions with the applicant. We'll have those discussions with them, and then we'll have responses. We'll try to forward responses to you.
Great, thank you, Sean. Let me understand also the setback. What's the relationship between the setback and the sidewalk? I mean, from what point is the setback measured?
The setback is measured from the property line.
Okay, so then it does not impact the sidewalk in that case, right? That's just...
No, unless the city provides allowances for the usage of public right-of-way for the sidewalk areas and for the public improvements in regards to landscaping. There's only there's 2 foot of setback along that side property line along Widening.
Got it. Thank you. Did the applicant receive the guidelines, the VTA guidelines? Are they in possession of those guidelines?
I believe they are provided a link to the VTA guidelines.
Okay.
Yes.
Can the applicant confirm that you actually have access to the VTA guidelines and you will be checking them out?
Yes, that's affirmative. We will.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last question really is to city staff, and that might be really more on the transportation side. What options do we have to make the parking on that section of street, or perhaps all of First Street, perhaps limited to maybe a 1 hour parking for commercial purposes, or maybe add some zones of no parking, or perhaps create some kind of a permitting process? What options does the city allow us in that respect?
I'll try and answer that question, Marisa. And if you have any other thoughts, you can jump in. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, cool. Yeah, so there currently had been previously, well, let's just say there were previous discussions in the city to do some type of a First Street streetscape, which would include an element of considerations for parking management along the roadway, specifically like things you're mentioning, Chair, time of day, parking restrictions, or time limit parking restrictions. That First Street Streetscape project was never initiated. We did do some internal development on a First Street kind of layout for parking about 2 years ago, but that never went anywhere internally at the city. And so it would be something that if this commission is interested in looking into that longer term, I think later in your discussion agenda tonight, you have consideration for future commission work scope or your work plan elements. That could be something that you look at for the future, and then that can get prioritized with other future projects. But as of right now, there is no active project, there's no active CIP project within the city to do that along First Street.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to consider thinking about that. Let's take it offline. And now, actually, one last question, more clarification really than question. Let me understand this whole bonus, density bonus allowance. The state is very clear as to what needs to happen. In this case, they provide the developer with reduced parking. But if the residents end up having more vehicles, so that gap between the reality and the allowance, who bears that burden? Is it the city's responsibility to allow for the parking of the extra vehicles should the residents own more vehicles? Who owns that burden?
Well, I don't believe the state regulation regarding density bonus or the city's regulations speak directly to that issue. I believe that the expectation with multifamily development is that the overall impact or demand for parking will be reduced, and that's the basis for the necessity for reduced parking standards. In effect, with reduced parking standards, if there is potential parking that's not provided or available to the applicants, yes, it would likely fall to the adjoining streets, the surrounding public streets. The density bonus regulations don't have an element to address that. They do not define parking for visitor parking. That's all encapsulated in the standards that are provided.
So there's no allowance, at least in the law as it's written out, to give the city any mechanism to limit the number of vehicles owned by the residents?
No, I mean, so the parking is based, of course, on the number of bedrooms, and that is supposed to encapsulate the parking demand for the unit, which incorporates, in effect, parking for visitors. And there is no other venue that I'm aware of that would provide for additional parking with a pure density bonus allowance. I can always reach out to the city attorney and see if there is a venue, and we can always convey that to you if we do find that there is an alternative, but I am not aware of an alternative to provide additional parking.
Yeah, it sounds to me like in that case, absent of such a mechanism, and maybe there is one, but you'll find out, but absent of such a mechanism, then the only way the city can deal with the extra vehicles would be to make it more difficult for folks to park on the street. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, parking is not considered an environmental impact under CEQA. So it could not be incorporated as a significant environmental effect in an environmental document. And the state does not provide for any accommodation or increase in parking. So it would have to be addressed by parking within the city if necessary.
Got it.
Chair, if I could just follow up on that,
yeah.
I think the approach is not so much that we would want to make it more difficult for people to park on the street if they have additional vehicles, but we definitely have been working with the commission on trying to find ways to help people manage that parking impact through solutions such as transportation demand management. You already saw kind of a first cut at our future development checklist, which tried to prioritize kind of TDM solutions for projects like this. So I just want to provide that response back for the community to hear that our approach really isn't to make it difficult for people to park, but it's trying to work with the developers to make it easier for people to not have to own vehicles and still be able to get around town.
Yeah, thank you, Jaime. I think you're right. And this is the line between where do you put regulations versus voluntary moves, right? That's a very fine line. Okay, so with that, actually, I'm going to solicit questions from the audience. If you have any questions and you're a member attending tonight, this is your chance to ask questions, or sorry, to make comments, excuse me. And going once, this is your chance. If you want to speak, please raise your hand. Going twice. And I don't see anyone requesting. I'm going to bring it back to the commission for final comments, if you have any, to the city staff and the developer. Stacy, go ahead, please.
Thanks. So my first comment for the developer would be, please get a copy of the draft development checklist that's focused on transportation that this commission has been working on. It was reviewed at our last meeting, and that's a pretty good summary of all the information. You know, may not be exhaustive, but it's pretty comprehensive of the information transportation related that this commission will be looking for. I would also say that, you know, even though you're not required by law when you provide certain affordable housing, that we ask the developers to voluntarily consider providing appropriate levels of parking for the residents and the guests of your building. This community is very concerned about spillover of residential parking into the downtown area and the surrounding neighborhood. I would also say that given, and I think it was just mentioned about transportation demand management, given the VTA bus route is right there, you know, supplementing and with official encouragement of having, you know, residents use that bus route, you know, that may be one way to attract people who don't own vehicles. The next thing I want to say, and this will probably be in the development guideline, I don't think this is specified in our checklist that I just talked about, is that this commission has felt for years that the VTA bike storage guidelines are insufficient, and all other developments in this city have provided bike storage in excess of what those guidelines say, and we would ask the developer to please kindly voluntarily consider that. And just a little comment, I think, on the TIA and transportation is because it wasn't clear in the staff report, is our direction has been to continue a LOS, level of service. I would request that, you know, we have action-oriented TIAs. And the other thing that didn't come up, and Sean, I'll call your name out here too, just to draw your attention to this, in most of the First Street projects on that side of the road, we have looked, the city has asked for a wide alley widening, and that wasn't brought up here. So if you could please look at that and talk with the developer about that. Ditto on the sidewalk, we've been asking for sidewalk widening on First Street. So if we could check on that as well too, to make sure that the width of this sidewalk is consistent with what we've been asking the other developers to provide. And then a couple other comments for staff is, I think we've been moving the ball forward on starting to analyze the cumulative impact of traffic. I think we now need to start counting parking and the cumulative impact of parking, and where there's the gap between what the developer's providing and what's really needed and what's getting spilt over. I think we need to start thinking about proactively calculating that. And I've raised it many times before, it's come up tonight, but I thought the first streetscape was not done, but that was still something that was going to be in progress. And this keeps coming up every time we have a First Street project. So I think that would help everyone. And then the final thing, which has also come up tonight, is the live work thing. That needs a lot of clarity, because if it's going to be a work thing, then what is it? And as our chair has said, what is the impact on parking? Because if it's a work thing and it's not just somebody working from home, it becomes somebody who has services and people are coming to that services, then there's also additional parking, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the comments I have, and I appreciate the applicant for bringing this project forward and hearing our comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Other comments from the commission? Suresh, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to add a couple of things to what Commissioner Banerjee mentioned. One is I am really concerned about the parking spillover, especially. I think what compounds this is the mechanical lift structure and the parking. It's a disincentivized from people from going back into the parking structure. And I worry that Whitney or First Street will become like a default parking mechanism, especially for residents who want to be in and out maybe for an hour or so. So this is definitely a concern, and concern to the bike and ped safety. We have to assume that the First Street projects will have a number of kids, using either First Street or Whitney, possibly through San Antonio to get to the high school, or possibly one of the elementary schools. And I'm concerned about the safety aspect that's caused by the parking issue. Second is I second Commissioner Banerjee's request to look at the VDA guidelines, and we ask that they provide enough bike parking, and we should assume going forward that the number of bikes that every family or every unit will have, there'll be either 1 or 2 bikes at least per unit, and that's only going up. So I request that be taken into consideration and provide ample and safe, I would say, bike parking facilities at the structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Other comments? Okay, so with that, I have one final comment, and that's really to city staff. Let's really make it a priority to look at parking on First Street and the adjoining streets in view of those developments, whether it's a permitting process or limited parking or something that addresses that potential surplus of vehicles that would be parking on the streets before it's too late, before the developments end up occupying on the vast majority of First Street. So with that, I want to thank the developer and the city staff for the presentation. And we move to item number 3 on the list on the agenda, which is 374 2nd Street Design Review, Packard Foundation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Steve Golden, Senior Planner. I'll present tonight on this item. I'm going to turn off my video while I screen share just because I have some issues with that. Sorry, let me get this going here. Sorry, a couple clicks. All right, I'm sharing, so hopefully you can see that.
Yes, thank you. Okay,
so this item tonight is the Packard Foundation parking lot modification and carport installation at 374 2nd Street, which is directly across the street from the Foundation's main office building on 2nd Street. So the site highlighted here is between the public alley and 2nd Street, just north of Lyle and south of Whitney Street. It consists of 5 parcels. They will be merging those parcels together and basically resurfacing the whole lot, and will be a new configuration. Just to give you some history of the site, because there is some history there. So as with a lot of these infill sites, there's just things that have happened in the past. And so just to kind of summarize, the existing surface parking lot area, it's about 35,000 square feet. You can see here, this is how it's kind of laid out currently. 3 of those lots have one-way drive aisles, and they're accessed from both 2nd Street and the public alley. and they kind of have differing driveway one-way access, just kind of depending on how it's laid out. And then it's got that angled oriented parking accessible from the drive aisle. There's currently a total of 58 parking spaces. It does include some accessible parking, but those parking spaces are not compliant with the current building code. So that's something that will be corrected. And then the spaces, or the lots that are currently vacant will be improved with parking. And this is kind of how the parking lot existed previous to the Packard Foundation. There was a building where the Packard Foundation exists now. Actually, there is a couple buildings, and this parking area was utilized for that building, and it's remained in this current configuration since then. So again, part of the history of when the Packard Foundation building was proposed, there was a lot of detail provided in the agenda report, but just quickly going over, and sorry for the sort of the crudeness of the slide, but just wanted to put some of the numbers there. So the existing building when the Packard Foundation building was proposed was a 62,000 square foot office and retail center. And the Packard Foundation was proposing a 44,000 square foot office building. There was a traffic study or some information provided by actually Hexagon, who you're familiar with, provided information to the commission at the time. And they determined that based on the change of use and the change of the size of the building, that there would be a reduction in 450 daily trips. So based on that assessment, there was no further traffic or transportation assessment that was warranted based on general plan policy. And the commission and council adopted, through the California Environmental Quality Act, they adopted a categorical exemption for an urban infill project, in part because there was less than significant traffic impacts. With regards to parking, again, in like that 2008 office retail center, there was about 170 total parking spaces. It included the subject site tonight, which has 58 spaces. Sorry, I think the address there should be 374. 58 parking spaces at 374 2nd Street. And what the Packard Foundation was proposing with their office building would have required 152 parking spaces. In lieu of that, they provided 67 parking spaces, and there was, at the time, there was an agreement between the city and the Packard Foundation for this reduction. And let me get to the next slide here. And that was documented in a development agreement and deed restriction recorded on the property. At the time, they called it alternative transportation, and I snuck the word demand in there, but alternative transportation management program, or ATMP. And what the development agreement required was a number of activities that the Packard Foundation would implement to reduce single occupancy vehicles. So with that, I just listed out all of the activities that the Packard Foundation has implemented and noted in their letter that was included in the agenda report. So all of these items have been implemented. The city monitored with the help of Hexagon over a 5-year period per the development agreement. And it was found that there was in fact a reduction in vehicles parked in the parking lot, and the 5-year monitoring satisfied the development agreement, and the city will move forward with agreement from the foundation to record yet another document which says you don't need to do any more monitoring, but you do need to implement the ATMP in perpetuity or until the building is demolished. So many of these things are what I heard some people talk about tonight and in past meetings about VMT and mitigation measures. So this project has these already implemented, and I'm not sure what else that they could do as far as mitigation. Maybe charge for parking, and decouple that from something, but usually in like a, and what the foundation is doing, they wouldn't necessarily charge for parking, but there's all these measures have been implemented and have reduced the parking needs and have in turn reduced trips. So onto the actual proposal. This is the layout that's been provided by the Packard Foundation. You'll see that it's now, I would say, a more conventional parking lot with two-way drive aisles, 90-degree parking. They will be merging the 5 lots together, and they will be replacing the 58 angled parking spaces with 86 perpendicular spaces. It does include the accessible parking, which is now compliant with building code requirements. They are going to be proposing 41 EV charging spaces. Most of those are in that center island area, which is where the carport structure is being proposed with a PV system on top of that. So that will be providing the energy or offsetting the energy for the EV charging. And then there's some other EV charging along 2nd Street. Other improvements are the fact that they will be reducing curb cuts along 2nd Street from 3 curb cuts down to 2. So that will improve the pedestrian environment, and also improves or reduces potential pedestrian vehicle conflicts along 2nd Street. They are eliminating the alley access, so that will improve circulation through the alleyway for those projects that have driveways or other access requirements on the alleyway. And they will be providing I think you mentioned the 2-foot 2-foot dedication for the alleyway width. So it's not shown on this sheet, but it is in their civil plans. And the city will condition the 2-foot dedication. Again, there are other improvements as to overall to circulation, because instead of those one-way drive aisles and you enter in 2nd Street, maybe come off the alley back into the parking lot onto 2nd Street, as you look for parking, this layout reduces the kind of enter, exit out of the public right of way. So it should improve circulation for 2nd Street. Oops. Let me just go back here. Just real quick overview, as you probably know, as far as the pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the area. There's many improved crosswalks and sidewalks in the vicinity highlighted on this slide. There's an existing mid-block crosswalk which the Packard Foundation installed in 2010 or shortly thereafter. That will remain. They also, you were talking about the bulb outs. There is the 2nd Street and Whitney bulb outs, which the Packard Foundation installed, so those will remain. And there's good crosswalks on San Antonio with the flashing warning lights. As far as bicycle facilities, as you know, there's a Class 2 bike lane along South San Antonio. The Packard Foundation has ample bicycle parking with 24 Class 2 bicycle parking spaces, and they also have 14 Class 1 parking spaces at the building, or actually at the building across the street, which is owned by the foundation. And they also have locker room facilities, which is a good incentive for pedestrian and bicycle users for those modes of transit. Also, as noted, I think in the last presentation was Route 40, VTA bus Route 40 on San Antonio. And there's the bus stops right at San Antonio and 2nd Street. I'm just gonna quickly glance over these. There's just some renderings of the actual carport structure itself, but I'll get back to those if there's any questions. So just to let the commission know, projects are usually reviewed by the Complete Streets Commission, and then they go to the Planning Commission with your recommendations. However, in this particular project, we ended up going to the Planning Commission first. So they did approve the project or recommend approval to the City Council at their September 2nd meeting. But any recommendations that you have tonight will be incorporated into the agenda report that is provided to the City Council. So with that, I can conclude my presentation. I can answer any questions that you have, and the applicant is here. They typically have 10 minutes, but they might just be providing some comments and be available for your questions as well. And that does it for me.
Thank you, Steve. Does the applicant wish to speak now, or are they just prefer to take questions?
Yes, hi, this is Craig Naiman. I am the VP and the CFO of the Packard Foundation. Thanks to the chair and the commission for hearing our project update today. I think Steve did a really good job, excellent job describing the substance of the project. And so I guess I'll let Steve's description of the project stand on its own. But for context, I thought maybe I'd just highlight a few of the Packard Foundation's motivations for the project, which may not be obvious from the project package itself, and it would serve as good context. First, just like our building headquarters project a decade ago, this project is similarly motivated by our programmatic concerns with climate change and the accompanying desire to reduce the foundation's carbon footprint. And since our building's net zero energy, one of the largest remaining carbon footprint elements we have is our employees' commute. And so through this project, we intend to expand our employee EV charging from the 5 current EV stations to the 41 that Steve mentioned. And further, to support those EV chargers with the on-site solar canopy. So the idea, of course, is to encourage more of our drivers to do so in an EV way, solar-enabled EV way, which decreases our carbon footprint. The second justification motivation is, as Steve noted, we currently operate under an ATMP that's agreed upon with the city, and we would continue to do so, meet those ATMP responsibilities that the project is approved. One of those responsibilities is to arrange for off-site parking and potentially shuttle visitors back and forth when visitation exceeds parking spots available. This project will limit those few occasions when satellite parking requirements are triggered, and so this is a helpful, although occasional, efficiency gain. And then third, again, as Steve touched upon, the foundation would like to make more rational use through better design of the 5 lots it currently owns, since we did not own all 5 lots at the time the earlier headquarters project was approved. So that subsequent ownership allowed for a more rational and better designed use, not only to incorporate those EV chargers that I described, but also make it more a conventional parking lot, better designed, for example, with the internal recirculation as opposed to the current situation where cars might have to enter from 2nd Street and then exit in the alley and then re-enter from the alley and then exit on 2nd Street to search for a spot. So that's kind of a rough summary of our motivations. I hope that gives you a better sense of the motivation for the project, and we look forward to hearing the commission's comments. Thanks for your time, and I will listen to your comments.
Great, thank you, Mr. Naiman. I want to first say thank you both for the presentation, and thank you to the foundation to have lived long enough in Los Altos to remember the site before the building was built. So I really applaud the work that you've done and what the foundation has done so far. So I'm going to turn it over to any questions from the commissioners. Stacy, go ahead.
Thanks. I just have a couple quick questions we just need brief answers. The first one is, does anybody have any sense of this parking lot changes? what's the estimated increase in average daily vehicle trips that we're expecting?
So I would just offer that the scope of the foundation's activities and our facilities are remaining the same. And so we're not expanding our scope of our facilities or our activities. And so aside from accommodating occasional spikes, I would speculate that not much in the way of additional trips would occur, although I'm struck by your previous presentation discussion about spillover parking from recent developments. I mean, right now, just observe, our parking lot is substantially filled, even though our office is closed, with spillover parking from the construction on the First Street projects. And so I'm imagining perhaps when those condos are complete, there might also have been spillover parking as well. Certainly there is currently neighbors who park in our parking lot.
Yeah. And then the next brief question is, I appreciate the confirmation that even once this parking lot is in place, that you plan to continue with the ATMP. I know you have much of it on hold because of COVID, but appreciate that you will be continuing with it. And can you also just confirm that, as I understand it, these 5 parking lots now, or 5 lots, they're required to be maintained as parking for the particular Packard Foundation building? Will they continue to be required to all be maintained for the Packard Foundation building?
I don't know about required, but certainly it's our intention to utilize it for our Packard Foundation headquarters, yes.
Okay.
I mean, as it relates to parking demand, they certainly will need to maintain parking for the building. And I think we would have to revisit another agreement between the city and the Packard Foundation should that change in the future.
And then the final question is, what are we seeing as I'm just wondering about the details about any, certainly appreciate the value of solar panels and going to net zero for the vehicles that already make the trip to your facility. Is there any details about any trade-offs or loss with respect to that open space or, mature trees or anything like that? And this is my final question. Thank you.
There was significant discussion about that at the Planning Commission meeting about, impacts to the lot. And so we tried and to the trees on the premises, and we've tried to mitigate the effects on the trees that are currently there. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about that.
Great, thank you, Craig. Steve, go ahead. You're muted, Steve.
Craig, since you brought up the question of spillover parking and the fact that the parking lot is currently used by people who don't work for the foundation, I was curious as to what is the foundation's policy right now about people parking there who are not employees or visitors?
Well, we reserve the right to enforce the private nature of our parking. And so, there's placards out there that say, your right to give in trespass or, right to trespass is freely given, but we reserve the right to enforce it. So at the current time, we're able to accommodate occasional parking without much impact to us, and we haven't had to tow anyone away in recent memory. But if it became a problem and we had was unable, if our staff couldn't park because there were, others in our parking lot, then we'd have to take a stricter approach to enforcement of our parking.
And just to follow up on that, and with the EV stations that you are, in my opinion, by the way, greatly increasing with your new plans, would you expect that those people who occasionally use those parking spaces might also take advantage of those EV stations?
No, we were not going to open that up for public charging, in part because it would be very difficult for us then to kind of manage our parking lot for the staff's parking, which is the intent. And so we wouldn't open it up for outside charging.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Other questions? Cindy.
I just have one question, and it's probably for staff. Are there any changes to, or maybe two related questions? By merging the 5 lots into one, are there any changes to requirements for how we need to handle parking or flow of traffic related to that? And then the second is, once you do merge the lots, let's say if the Packard Foundation is no longer going to use it and handing it over to somebody else, does that remain does that remain a one consolidated unit, or can they then break it apart back into the 5 lots?
So as far as merging the lots together, there really isn't anything that we can require that isn't associated with the land use that already is existing. So the building itself, and the parking demand that requires. And then once it's merged together, I mean, the interesting thing is in the downtown area, I believe the zoning districts don't have a minimum lot size. So it's kind of a weird situation where if somebody wanted to subdivide again out, I mean, I suppose they could, or create a different project where this parking lot exists. But at that point, we would have to look at, well, how is the parking going to be served for the foundation building? Because that's really what it's supporting right now. So if somebody wanted to underground a lot of parking and provide parking for both the foundation building and then a future land use on top of this lot, then that might be possible at that point. We'd have to look at that.
Right. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions? I have one question to the foundation. Is the AT&P results, the monitoring results, are they public? And if so, can they be shared with us?
I don't know if they are public or not. They were submitted to the city.
Yeah, the city has copies of them. There's no reason why we couldn't provide them to the, if there's.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'll be very instructional for the commission. Great, so I'm gonna actually turn that to the section of input from the public. I see one hand up. Roberta, you got 3 minutes. I presume your hand up is for this section. Is that correct?
That is correct. I do want to talk about the Packard Foundation.
Can
you hear me?
3 minutes. Yes, we can hear you. 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I have some very, very, very major concerns. When this building was approved, the number one was conditions of approval. And I did share it with one of the commissioners, and it really distresses me a great deal that that was not part of the packet. In addition, there's deed restrictions on the building itself and the properties. The deed restrictions also were not provided to you. So you are being asked to give up something, although this gentleman says at the commission meeting, he said he wanted that out of the deed restriction, that he did not want that to be part of the deed restriction moving forward. So I would urge all of you to get the information from staff on the deed restrictions and on the conditions of approval, which I was able to get from John Biggs. Those are the first questions that I had, because if you don't know what you're giving up and what the changes are going to be, I mean, obviously you're going to be giving up 27 trees that will be torn down, rainwater collection, and the justification that they want to add 41 EV stations, it also is not justified. It's because they want to do it, they can. How many are really needed? Are 20 needed? is it really necessary to have a major expanse of these solar panels? You know, if you had questions for your business, what is the justification for the number that you picked? That's never been, because the solar panels themselves could be broken up into smaller sections rather than having a massive expanse of asphalt. And I also want to mention that I also researched, go and look at the Packard Foundation values on their own website. And they tout that they do not want expanses of asphalt. They do not want the heat. They tout how much they support nature and how they pollinate the plants. And they also say, oh, well, some of the trees are not in good condition. Well, whose fault is that? They own these trees, and recently they went and chopped down the top of the canopies all along 2nd Street, didn't bring in an arborist, and had very, very little concern.
Roberta, I think your time is up, so I'm going to interrupt you here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for looking. Please look at those things before you make a decision.
Great, thank you.
It's really critical.
Great. Any further comments from the audience? I don't see anyone requesting to speak, so I'm going to bring it back to the commission. Any final comments or feedback or recommendations? Remember, this project has already been approved by the Planning Commission. It's recommended for approval, so your chance here is to add any recommendations that were missed in the previous rounds. Okay, Stacy, go ahead.
Thank you. So I would just like to make sure that we confirm, and I think it has been confirmed here, but with any plans that we draw up with the property owner, that we maintain the ATMP. And I would also like to suggest, and see if any of my colleagues also support this or not, a future monitoring of the ATMP like was done in the past. Once this project is implemented and we're out of COVID, whether it's a one-time monitoring or something more extensive, but just to make sure that this project hasn't created a increase in average daily car trips. Because I think what we're hearing is the intention is that it's not supposed to. The second thing is if we could, Steve, take a look at, and by we, I'm kind of pointing at you, those conditions of approval and the restrictions that the previous speaker just mentioned, and make sure that the intent of parking remains. So that if we're creating this parking and these lots for the Packard Foundation, that's what it's for. And I think, and any changes to that would mean you'd have to come back and, you know, go through an approval process. And my final point is, I really like the area around the Packard Foundation. Walking around there is beautiful. If you know anything about green street infrastructure, like they've done an incredible investment, incredible job over there with rainwater capture, with the plants, with, you know, bringing the nature. And I think that that's one of the beauties of what this project had. It's really a showcase of that for this in this city. And I would encourage the Packard Foundation to think about how they can maintain that. I appreciate, you know, wanting to move to net zero through slower charging with your employee, you know, with the vehicle trips made to your facility. But how will this visually and aesthetically look while maintaining and even improving upon all that green streetscape infrastructure? And I think that's a challenge. My challenge to the Packard Foundation is how can we improve upon green streetscape infrastructure while we're adding solar charging. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Other comments? Suresh, go ahead.
I was going to mention this, and now that Commissioner Banerjee asked, I want to make sure that I support and request the Packard Foundation to continue with the ATMP monitoring. And although it's not an insignificant change in the parking, so I would, given that also we have coming out of the COVID situation, I think it makes sense, and that's a request I think I support. Thank you.
Okay. Steve, Tom, Cindy. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to end it here. I hope you got the feedback that you're seeking, Steve. And thank you for Craig and Steve for the presentation. All right, so it is 7:04. I'm going to actually, let's take a 10-minute break, and we will reconvene at 11-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:15.
Did you say 7:15, Chair?
Yes, that's what he said, Suresh.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, it's 7:15. For the commissioners, let's turn the videos back on, please. Steve, you there? And Cindy? Well, we have quorum anyway. We're gonna go ahead and resume. Steve and Cindy, if you're back, please turn your videos on. So we are now moving to section number 4 on the agenda, and item number 4, excuse me, and that is Complete Streets Master Plan. Marissa, is that you or Jaime? Who's taking the lead here?
Jeff is actually here with us, and he's
going
to do the final presentation. Yeah, and before we get into that, I just want to acknowledge some of the emails that we received today. We received a number of communications from people with some concerns that this is the final adoption of the Complete Streets Master Plan. So I just wanted to speak to that and let you know that I received all the emails. This is not the end of the road for the Complete Streets Master Plan. The public comment period is still open until the end of October. So we welcome your comments until then. And this is the reason this is the kind of final review of the Complete Streets Master Plan by the Complete Streets Commission is because the Complete Streets Commission has reviewed the plan at every step of the way and reviewed every section and all the different elements. And so this feels like a natural time to, having incorporated all of the previous comments from the Complete Streets Commission, to let them do their final review and then pass it on. So like I said, the public comments portion will be open for another month. After that, we'll do a study session with the City Council. The City Council will get to review the plan during the study session. And then a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months after that is when the council would potentially have the option of formally adopting the plan. So there is still time. I also want to speak to St. Joseph community members. We received some correspondence that people were concerned. And I just want to clarify that and say that the St. Joseph plan line drawing is part of its own CIP, capital improvement project. And that's why it's been having its own separate outreach. And at our last outreach meeting a month or 2 ago, we said that we would come back and have another meeting in the fall. That's still going to happen. And at that meeting, we'll follow up on the parking counts that we discussed. And so the St. Joseph plan is incorporated into the Complete Streets Master Plan as an appendix, just for completeness and for reference. However, the outreach process will continue to inform the details of that plan as it has in the past. So I hope that can clarify things a little bit. There's still time for all of this. So with that,
Marissa, let me understand something here. So how would the commission then provide feedback after you receive, I guess, after you conclude the public comment period?
We can have you review kind of a list of comments, if that would be helpful. Or we can talk tonight about a plan for how to handle that.
Yeah, it sounds to me it's a bit sort of putting the cart before the horse here. We're going to send an approval to you while the project is still open for public comments. Shouldn't we actually postpone the approval until we're done with all the public comments?
Yeah, the idea originally was to keep the public comment open until the study session with the council. That was the plan initially, and we can discuss that if we think that needs to be amended. We can also discuss if the public thinks they need a couple of more weeks to review.
No, I'm okay. I'm fine with the public comments to continue to come in. I think my question to you and to Jeff is, what is it that you want from us tonight? If you want an approval of what, given that the project is still open for public comment? What are we approving exactly?
I can let Jeff step in and answer that question. I think the answer so far is to, yeah, kind of approve that. We've studied all the various different components of the plan. So this is kind of the passing off of the plan to the council for their study session.
That's right, and Chair and Complete Streets Commission members, again, good to be with you, Jeff Knowles. This is the last scoped meeting as part of this process for the Complete Streets Master Plan. And so what we're hoping for is commission action today to approve the draft plan that will go to a city council study session. That will include additional feedback we get from this body if they want to provide written comments to us, public comments, and then council comments, at which point we will revise and prepare a final draft plan that would go to city council for their adoption. That would happen in the, I'd say,
yeah,
winter,
still, Jeff, I'm still confused now. If we're still open to receive public comments, how are we approving a draft plan when it's still open to more comments in the public? I mean, I understand that we have to approve something that can go to city council. I get that, but when it's still open for input from the public and we're not reviewing that input, I don't understand the sequence, the time sequence here.
Mayor, this is Jaime Rodriguez from the Transportation Division. Just wanted to offer a thought there. So what we are planning to do is to take the, we are hoping to do, I should say, with your support tonight, is to take the draft plan in its current form to the city council, because they haven't had the luxury that the commission has had to kind of go through on a monthly or sometimes, you know, two times a month process of kind of providing direct input on the development of the plan in its current form. So we just want to get it to them so they can review it in the form that it is today. You're not going to give it an approval tonight and then walk away if there's comments later. There'll be a public scoping period for people to review after the city council sees it. If in that time we're seeing a substantial amount of comments, we can definitely return back to you. There's a limited amount of meetings scoped for Alta, but we at city staff can definitely come back to you anytime during that public period before we go back for a final approval city council and let you guys, or just give you guys an update as a commission on kind of what major modifications, if any, there were to the commission and things that are of substance. And if that's a good plan for the commission to move forward, we'd appreciate your help in trying to get this to city council, because we really want to give them a chance to provide input.
Sure. Okay, so I understand the purpose here, Jaime. So I think really perhaps though what we should say, not approval of the master plan, of the master plan, but really more of recommending, forwarding, or sharing with the city council for review. That's really what it is. We're not approving anything right now. We're just saying we're ready to share that document with city council for the input.
Chair, may I?
Correct?
Yes.
That could work.
Okay.
Chair, may I?
Do that then.
Sure,
yeah, go ahead, please. Yes.
Yeah, I have new information. So originally we were planning on taking this to a study session October 26th, which made this timing critical tonight. Today, the department head team met and it shifted. It's tentatively now on the November 9th city council meeting. So we could bring it back to you, was it October 27th, if you want to review public comments at that time.
What would you recommend? I'm okay either way. What's your recommendation?
Well, I say we proceed tonight, receive your comments, and then if we, depending on the types of comments we receive, we could then bring it back to you, and or maybe I should say that the amount of comments we received that might, you know, we could share that with you and talk to you along the way this month in October and decide if an October discussion is necessary before the commission.
Okay, very well. Let's proceed then like that. So we'll just simply recommend sharing the document with city council, and then pending additional comments in the community, we'll either have to bring it back on the agenda in October, or just simply, if there are no further comments that would change the document materially, then we'll just keep it as is. Very well. Okay, Jeff.
Great. Thanks. That's a great clarification. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is present to you the draft CSMP comments that we've received so far, just a summary of what we've been hearing. And of course, we're expecting to hear more tonight and in the coming weeks. I was going to walk through the City Council study session presentation that I prepared. I want this CSC, since you've been such an integral part, kind of co-authors with staff and with Alta on this, to look over my shoulder and see if I'm presenting the key points to council. I also want this to serve as an opportunity for the public to see the plan without reading the entire, the entire page for page, get the highlights version of it through a slide deck, and then just talk about next steps. So summary of comments that we received to date. So far, 61 comments, about 6 different individuals, 3 members of the Complete Streets Commission. Appreciate those detailed comments that we received to date. Majority of them are small changes, clarifications, different language suggestions, typos that can be caught. A majority of them can be easily addressed as we revise for council for their adoption. Some recurring comments that have come up, providing an executive summary, user manual. There have been some comments about the length of this document, especially when you take all the appendix items together. This is something that Chair, I think, mentioned the last time we met, is to put together a 2 to 4 page spread that can go at the front of this document to explain the purpose of it, the big moves that are being recommended, and how the city can move forward. There was also some concern, I think, just about the concept plan line drawings. How do they intersect with the Complete Streets Master Plan? We used them for different purposes throughout this process. Some of it was for engagement and getting ideas for the CSMP. Some of it was to get ideas for CIP projects that were already funded and moving forward. And some of it was just to spark a conversation about some projects that have been long in the books, but needed to move forward. And so that's something we can clarify in the next iteration. So those are kind of the 2 bigger moves that I see happening after this draft is concluded. So I'm going to walk through the council presentation. Start by giving them an understanding of the timeline of where we are, starting in the fall of 2020 and winter of 2021 with our existing conditions collection, our community outreach that we conducted, coming up with project ideas in the spring of last year or this year, prioritizing those ideas with the public and with the CSC, and then developing this draft plan in the fall of 2021. I'd share the vision that you helped create. Our community-focused and sustainable streets empower people of all ages and abilities to access destinations comfortably, safely, and conveniently, regardless of their mode of transportation. Still, I've written a lot of these vision statements, and your pen to paper, I think, is still one of the best I've read. I'd walk through the introduction and lay out the goals, again, that came directly from the CSC and the community: increasing activity, improving safety, creating a connected network, addressing climate change impacts, ensuring robust community input, and evaluating progress and adjusting as time goes on. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the performance metrics that you helped craft, I'd share those with the group. And then go into existing conditions, what we learned as we collected data and spoke with the community about demographics and equity, land use, how that drives people walking and bicycling, employment and commute patterns, bicycle and pedestrian involved collisions, where are those hot spots located, where there are existing bike facilities, where there are existing pedestrian facilities like sidewalks and crosswalks, and where there needs to be those multimodal connections at transit stops. I'd like to share with them information about commute patterns to date, specifically the number of people that drive alone to get to work versus the 3.3% that use active modes, walking and biking, and really trying to target those commuters to change those patterns. We also have this map up of where the employment is located in proximity to Los Altos, knowing that there's a lot of retail jobs along El Camino Real and also in the downtown area that maybe we could convert to walking and biking trips. We also know from the public outreach we did just how many trips are made getting kids to school and how we want to try and convert some of those vehicle trips to active trips. I'd like to share with the council 2 maps, the hotspot analysis for our collisions involving pedestrians and bicycling over the last 5 years, along with those fatality locations. This, I think, ties in pretty closely with where we see the preponderance of protected bikeways, and the majority of our pedestrian improvements, specifically around the downtown area. I think the council will be interested to know the length and breadth of outreach that was conducted. So talking to them about the project website that was created, the interactive map, and how many responses we received on that, the community survey that went out, the Complete Streets Task Force, and the membership and the meetings that were held, the community workshops that were held for the concept plan line drawings, and the number of Complete Streets Commission meetings that either were focused solely on this through study sessions or a major part of your agendas over the last year, along with ad hoc meetings with school community members. So I'd like to show them what that interactive web map looks like and the input that we received, getting information about routes that need improvements, routes that work well, locations that are barriers for people bicycling and people walking, and then destinations that people would like to reach by walking or bicycling. Share with them the community workshops. This one here is when Marisa was with us presenting the Loyola Corners concept plan line drawings. And then walk through the concept or the chapter 4 of the plan, which is the Safe Routes to School plan, and talk with them about the suggested walk and roll to school brochures. 10 updated schools and 7 new ones were created as part of this process, including school improvement plans for infrastructure improvements to 12 schools that serve Los Altos students. This is one example. This is Los Altos High. This is the brochure side of the suggested walk and roll maps. And this with community input, school input, CSE input is what a revised suggested walk and roll route map looks like. And these have since been digitized and are now available online and through tablets and smart devices at schoolroutes.org. And this is an example of what a school improvement plan looks like, itemizing all of the low cost and some longer term vision infrastructure changes around the school sites. This is Los Altos High again. I'd like to walk the City Council through the different bicycle network recommendations. First, starting with the types of bikeways that are part of this plan: shared use paths, bicycle lanes, and buffered bicycle lanes, bike routes that could be converted to bike boulevards with traffic calming features, and class 4 separated bikeways. We didn't start from scratch. We're updating the 2012 plan that has made some improvements. This is the existing map today. And from that, we were able to build a new network in 2021 that tries to fill in the network and create better connections to areas that were identified by the public and the CSC as important destinations to reach. Most importantly, creating a connected network across the city, north, south, and east, west. And also show the downtown area that includes connections to City Hall through Class 1 facilities and study areas in the downtown, looking at State Street and and First as study corridors. For the pedestrian network, I explained that we've got these recommendations broken down into corridor improvements. Those are sidewalks and pathways that are either new sidewalks filling in gaps or major rehabilitation to existing paths. And then spot improvements at intersections that would take the form of crossing improvements, such as marking the crosswalks, signs as signals like stop signs or flashing signs or beacons, and then roadway design options like adding curb extensions with green stormwater infrastructure, raised crosswalks, or other concrete. Again, we're updating the 2015 pedestrian master plan. The last plan in 2015 was very ambitious, and so our focus for the pedestrian side is to make sure that we put forward a plan that is realistic, that's prioritized, and targets the areas in most need. And so we've looked closely at those sidewalk gaps that need major maintenance and rehabilitation. We've also come up with 65 spot improvements, and again, you can see the majority of those are clustered in the downtown, where we expect and see a lot of walking and the need for walking, and Loyola Corners, specifically crossing Foothill Expressway. In addition to physical infrastructure changes, the plan identifies existing and proposed programs that the city can take on. They're broken up into 3 buckets: education, encouragement, and evaluation. These are some of the programs that are in the plan, including developing school curriculum to educate kids about walking and bicycling safely to school, bike rodeos, traffic safety campaigns, and safe routes for seniors. Encouragement programs like the city taking part in partnering in a walk and roll to school day, closing down some streets and having street festivals to encourage people to walk and take advantage of local businesses, and then walk or wheel days with school partners. Evaluation takes the form of conducting counts on a regular basis, analyzing collisions when they occur, conducting student hand tally surveys, and general public surveys. Chapter 7 is how we put it together. In the CSMP draft as it is, there are 200 project recommendations. That's 42 miles of new bikeways, 10 miles of pedestrian walkways and corridors, and 65 spot improvements. You don't have the budget or staff resources to complete all of these in the next 10 to 20 years. And so it's important to think about how to prioritize them. With the CSC, we developed these criteria and weighted them accordingly so that projects that provided connectivity and access scored the highest, followed by safe routes to school, projects that were identified directly by the community, projects that increased the comfort of people walking and biking, the feasibility for staff to undertake them and the cost, safety as in collision reduction factors, and geographic equity. That helped us come up with a set of high priority projects, and we were able to put costs to those. So to complete the high priority network for pedestrian, it's close to $2.8 million. Completing the high priority bike network is $4 million. Spot improvements is $7.3 million for a total of around $14 million. The last time we talked, we also identified different funding sources to get to that $14 million number to complete your high priority projects. It's a combination of local sources, grants that you receive by formula from the state, formula grants from the regional sources through VTA, and then competitive grants that we think that you would be able to compete for at the federal, state, and regional level. We also talked about conceptualizing your high priority projects in something called the Los Altos Loop. This is a way of really thinking about how each piece fits together as a unified whole, building high priority internal crosstown corridors, and then how do you link to your neighbors and other regional destinations using these purple connectors, these regional connections. We itemized what the city staff can be doing in the first year, as soon as this project is implemented in year 2022. Near-term projects that are already funded for school improvements based off of those school improvement plans. Completing designs that are in the works and funded, and projects that are also funded like on Clark and St. Joseph Avenue. And then 2023 to 2032, over the next 10 years, next phase of school improvements with the funding that's been identified, other projects that are already in the works in your CIP and have been funded, and then doing a lot of fundraising for studies and design and construction of your high priority projects. The plan includes appendix items, the complete community survey results, a detailed list of your bike and ped network and spot improvement network recommendations with costs and how they scored, and then all of your concept plan line drawings. Again, I think that this probably needs to be clarified that the concept plan line drawings, the goal of them was to engage residents on proposed roadway changes in an early planning phase. It's to start the design for future implementation as the streets are resurfaced and other CIP projects are rolled out. And for us, it also prepares exhibits for future grant opportunities. Some of these concept plan line drawings, after we went to the public, were revised. And from that, those projects were included in the CSMP as projects, whether they were spot improvements or pedestrian corridors or bikeway projects, they were included. Some concepts were heard by the public and the city staff decided not to move forward on them based off what we were hearing from the public. And so there's a record of that here in the appendix items, but some of them are not moving forward based off the outreach we heard. Some of them need more work, like Loyola Corners needs more outreach with property owners, and Grant needs more study, more concept done, looking at different counts and additional, essentially just looking at different driveways and different concept designs. So they're in various phases of completion is what I'd say. And so that needs to be clarified in the draft plan. But everything that is moving forward from the concept plan line phase is already identified as a recommendation, so it's consistent. And then as we talked about at the top, after we conclude with our council study session, which would happen in what Jim said, we're having that in most likely November. We'll close the public comment period. We'll revise the public draft based off of the public comments that we get. And then I would imagine in early 2022, we'll bring it back, that final public draft, a final version for city council adoption. So that's our next steps. And with that, I look forward to getting your feedback. I'd like to really hear from this group about the presentation, what's important to highlight with city council, what maybe is important to glance over, and about our next steps.
Great, thank you, Jeff. So let's have I presume that the members of this commission have read the 200+ page document. If you have not, I highly recommend that you do. And so with that, I'm gonna have you give Jeff your feedback. Steve, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to try to be as brief as I can be. I did read it, and I thought that the plan itself was terrific. It's voluminous, and I thought that a lot of the comments that I read that talked about the fact that it's going to be hard for the general public of our city, our constituents, to read all 272 pages. They'll probably get 25 into it and then look at the maps and go from there. So all the comments about the executive summary, I think, make a lot of sense to me. I want to just pull out of that for a second and talk about your comments, Chair, at the very beginning. I totally support going forward to the council saying that this is the process, but without approving the draft at today's meeting, because I think the comment period will generate sufficient input to where there could be substantial changes. And so I concur with that. In fact, one of the things that's happened to me over the last 2 weeks is that I've had people approach me who know that I'm on the commission to talk to me about what they thought of the plan, where that has never happened in the past. And a couple of the things that come up frequently are, one is the need for it to be evergreen and to make sure that that is highlighted at a very top level in the executive summary, and that it will be updated at least every 2 years, both in terms of what's been accomplished, but also looking forward as to what the new priorities are, with some rationale as to why that's happened. The other thing that keeps coming up actually is something that's not in the plan, except for one bullet, which is what we're doing with the downtown area. Lots of folks from all over the city that I talk to keep telling me how much they love the parklets now. They love dining outside. And what are we doing as a Complete Streets Commission to think about how we may re-engineer the streets so that they work both for the higher usage levels that people love doing today, as well as for pedestrian, bicycle, and car traffic. And of course, the one-way option keeps coming up as are you guys looking at that? So those things kind of may need to be highlighted a little more. I love the vision. I like the goals. I thought that a couple of the goals needed to be reordered, and I provided that feedback directly. But all in all, I think the plan is a heck of an achievement.
Thank you, Steve. Other comments and feedback to Jeff? Suresh, go ahead. I think you were just a smidgen faster.
Yeah, we're in jeopardy. No, I want to thank the staff, Jeff, Elta, for putting together a great plan. I read through the plan. Chair. It was a hard read, but even for me, but it was great. I think I applaud all the work behind it. I want to limit my comments to how you approach this with the City Council and the study session. I think it's important to highlight the vision and the spirit behind the plan. And I think that is critical to communicate to them. So, I think that sets the ground for how to approach the rest of the plan. And also I thought moving up, how we prioritize the plans. It's good to talk about the process and so on. I think that the City Council needs to know, but I think leading off with how we plan to prioritize the work and how that turned out, I think is important. I think spending some time on explaining that. I think we spent a lot of time going through how we prioritize the projects and why we picked those categories. And I think having the City Council understand that, I think is also critical. And then lastly, I just wanted to comment on what we're going to do about public comments. If I understand correctly, we're not approving the plan today. We are approving, or we would want the City Council to start taking a look at the plan. And I think it's important because it would be good to get it in front of them sooner than later. And if in fact there is feedback from them to take it back to the commission for changes, we should do that sooner than later. So, in fact, we're not approving the plan, and I think it makes sense. I do want to make sure that you are clear on the timelines as to when the public comments will close. In your slide, you kind of mentioned that maybe November or October, November, but I think it's important you set a date, and you set a date very soon, and you give ample time for the public to get their comments in. Ideally, you'll get the comments in before it gets to the City Council. But if you want to, extend the comment time for the public, I think that does make sense. And if the city staff feels like there is anything in there at all that needs to come back to the commission, I would encourage you to bring it back. So those are my primary comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Suresh. Stacey.
Thank you. I have one question before comments. The question is, can you summarize what outreach you have done to promote this plan to the public so they're aware of it and so they know how to give feedback and so they know the deadline?
I think that's a question for staff.
If it's okay, Marisa, I can maybe start us off. You can plug in. So when the app was made available, let me see. Sorry, I apologize. It's a little dark there. When the app was made available on the Los Altos CompleteStreets.com website, it was immediately kind of published for people to see. We've noted that more verbally as we've been at different meetings, but the city has not run any specific ads to let them know that that's been the case. We were really waiting for this process to finish its completion at the commission, and when it goes to City Council and that formal public kind of period is expanded before the City Council, the city will run ads in the paper to make sure people know that the document is there for review. What we're doing right now is just trying to get it to you guys for your final review based off of the input that you've provided in the past meeting, so we can get it to City Council.
And I will just add quickly to that at the same time that I sent all of the commissioners the notice that the plan was posted on the website and ready for review, I sent the same email to the task force and also to everyone who had signed up to receive updates on the Complete Streets Master Plan website.
Yeah, Marisa, how many people get updates on do you know off the top of your head from the Master Plan website?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can pull it up and report back in a few minutes. Okay.
So I'm going to switch over to comments now. I think my first comment is going to dovetail based upon what was just discussed. I think if I understood what you guys said, and particularly Jaime, what you said is that you were planning to do more public outreach for the draft of this plan as you lead into the City Council study session. I would encourage and am open to hearing what my fellow commissioners think, but I would encourage outreach now, collecting that input now, incorporating that input where appropriate, bringing that summary of that input to us, things where, you know, we need to discuss, we discuss in October since we have that time, and then taking it to City Council to sort of accomplish as much of that work we can here at the commission level before it gets elevated upstairs. The next point I want to make, and this was really the star of the show of the points that I wanted to make. I think that, Jeff, you've been with us a long time, and I think this plan has made good progress and effort. I'm really happy with the goals and the scoring and the vision and those kind of accomplishments and the feedback you've taken from this commission along the way. We can be demanding and ask for a lot of things. Now, one thing that I sort of feel and that's gone, that could achieve a little bit more is the concept plan line drawings. If I recall correctly, the original intention of those was to identify early on what we knew to be some of the priority intersections, hotspots, and corridors that needed attention. And certainly, you know, through council adding some to the list, through public input, we don't have everything ready. But my feeling here is if we need this master plan to apply for grants, what grant are we going to apply for with which project? I don't know the answer. If you know the answer, great, please tell me. If we don't know the answer, what I would suggest, and I have to ask for support from my fellow commissioners, is that when you come back in next month, you pick a couple concept plan line drawings, align them with what has turned up to be the priorities in the CSMP, aligned with what you've heard from community input so far, and let's get 2, 3, if you can, concept plan line drawings that we want. They might not be finished by October, but that we want to get to a final state such that by, I don't know what the deadline is, such that by the next time Measure B comes looking for money, you know, asking for grants, you know, applications, such that Anna Eshu's office says, hey, here's our grant, whatever the grant might be, that we have something that is ready to go to construction and that we can submit. And maybe we'll submit it 5 times till we struck a winner, but I want to have 2 or 3 of those where we're submitting them 5 times till we get a winner. I have some other small feedback. I'll send it on email. Apologies, I got distracted with the start of the school year and hadn't done my diligence to do that. And then finally, I'll say with the Los Altos Loop, that is a bit new and hasn't had a lot of input, really any at all from this group. So I would definitely encourage you to, you know, whatever fellow commissioners want to give you input, if you want to reach out to a couple, I would encourage you to tap some members of the task force, you know, whether you call a whole meeting or you just reach out to a couple of them. There's a couple folks on there that will have very good input for you. The other people that will have good input on the loop is Greentown Los Altos. A couple years ago, they actually created not a loop, but several routes throughout the city. And I know they did that because they came to me for feedback for some in the South. And so they've gone through some exercises of that already. And I would encourage you to tap into some of those things because I think the loop route needs some work. And then I have some comments about connections to jurisdictions that should be added, which I'll share on an email. And then I agree, of course, with the executive summary. And I think adding a lot of clarity for the public about this, what this is and what this isn't, and how they will have ample opportunity that anything before we take to construction will come back to them, and most likely more than once, not just at our commission, but then we'll have the chance at City Council, because I think there's been a lot of panic that's been set off today in the public that thinks that some of this is just going to go to construction without any more input. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that everyone has done on this, including my fellow commissioners.
Thank you,
but of course, staff.
Cindy and Tom.
Hi. couple of points. One thing I think that Commissioner Banerjee was just mentioning, made me think in terms of public input, it made me think that it would probably be important for the City Council report just to highlight the types of workshops, community workshops that you had and the notices that went out to engage the public, in addition to all the feedback that came in through the maps. So I think you spent a lot of time discussing with the community, and that's valuable. I think the City Council should know that. And then the other comment that I had, not specifically around the drawings, but from in the actual full document, I got a little bit concerned about how we're phrasing the objectives, because it looks like we have like 50 objectives, but the way, Jeff, that you had it in your presentation was more in line with, I think, how we intended it to be, where like we have more streamlined goals and then KPIs that map to each of those. And so if we can update that in the document, I think that's easier to follow and more what we intended. And then also just general comments on your deck. I think it's a good summary of what's the vision, what were we trying to do, what's the process we went through, and what's the output, and probably adding a little bit about expectations for how it would be implemented, not in terms of like how would we get the funding, but more of like what would be the process that we would go through to actually deliver on those, just so that the public is aware that we're not going immediately to development construction. But that type of summary, I think, is the right level of information to put in the executive summary, because I think that did a good job of capturing everything that's in the full document for those who aren't going to read the whole thing. And then the last one is related to the actual document. I don't know if it's just a formatting or page layout thing, but like when you try to look at one plan line drawing, it spills over into like 4 pages, or if you try to look at one table, it also spills over into multiple pages, and so it's hard to read it that way. I don't know if maybe condensing it probably would make it too small, but if there's anything that we can do there to improve its readability, that would be helpful. I'll stop there. I have also some minor like language feedback that I'll send over via email.
Thank you, Cindy. Tom?
Just that most everything was covered, but I really like the idea of the executive summary too, so that's about it.
Great, thank you. So Jeff, thank you. Look, I've been walking with you and Jaime this project now for well over a year, and I've seen its evolution. And there's a lot of rigor in this thing. So if the 200 plus pages don't just happen to be sketches and cartoons, they're content, real content. And for me, one of the criteria is if all 7 of us were to disappear tomorrow and you have a new commission that shows up the day after, do they know how to pick up and continue? And the answer is yes. At least I hope so. I think from this document, the answer is yes. But that's just half the picture also in my mind. I think we have upon us now another task, and that is how do you explain that complexity? And there's a lot of complexity in here to the public, to City Council and the public. And the sad reality is that if I were to grab randomly 10 folks off the street tomorrow and then sort of say, do you know what the master plan is? 9 out of 10 are going to give me a strange look. And that's just the reality of where we are. That's what it is. And so we have a task to kind of simplify the complexity and explain it. And here's what my thought process would look like. First one is, I would not stop public comment before you take it to City Council, before the study session with City Council. You want to use the City Council and the study session with City Council as the sort of Uber meeting that allows everyone who somehow missed on the prior meetings to voice their opinions. So do not, by all means, please do not stop public comment before the study session. Otherwise, you're gonna have a lot of angry folks for good or bad reasons. They're gonna be angry. The second thing is the executive section is more than an executive section. This is not just a 2-pager summary. This is really your marketing section. This is where you're going to take all that complexity and help them point or help the reader get to the section of interest to them in the fastest possible time without having to wade through 200 pages. So for example, you know, I think my colleague here, Stacy's like, hey, what project should I go funding for? Well, reality is actually page 181 says what projects you need to have. And so is 188 and 191. But, you know, I think we need to point people to those things. So have a paragraph in there that says, hey, you want to know what project needs to be funded now? Go here. Go to line number 1 through 5 of page 181 and for pedestrian for the next page or support, right? So you want this executive section to walk them through links, absent of computer links. You'd have links on the computer, but you don't have that in the document like that, but you want to sort of have the language that says, go see these projects here and there. I love the vision. I love the prioritization. That's unique. I don't think that Los Altos has ever done that before. I don't see that in the prior documents. I don't see prioritization. I don't see the criteria for prioritization. I don't even see a vision statement, by the way, which we have to come back and live by those words in our sessions. You know, how we help folks bike and move and accessibly go from point A to point B, you know, whatever the vision really says. There's a lot of good stuff in there. We have to make sure that we measure our projects based on those criteria going forward. And I think that vision section is going to be really important at the beginning to really make sure that the audience and city council understands the framework of what we're trying to do here and not get too quickly lost in the weeds of the drawings. I think if we end up having the folks quickly go to the drawings and focus on one particular project, missing that explanation and the framework, then we've done a poor job at explaining that complexity. I think they have to keep in mind first what we're trying to accomplish, because these projects, I can guarantee you, will change in the next couple of years. I can bet money that in the next couple of years, those 20 projects will look very different. But the purpose is that the framework around them will not change in the next foreseeable future. And that means if we ever have a data about a project, we can go back to the framework that was established in the vision and the priorities and the criteria and find new set of projects that will meet those priorities. And I think that's important for the public and city council to understand that thought process. And so that's what I mean by the executive section, but the executive brief is not just simply a nice preface to a novel. It's not. This is really more about explaining the bulk of it to those who are not, have no time nor interest in studying 200-page documents. I hope this is making sense to you and to the staff. But anyway, I want to thank you. I want to thank Jaime. I want to thank everybody's worked on this thing. This has been a labor of love to some extent, but I do believe that actually now our next task is explaining that to the public and to city council. Great. So with that, I think I'm gonna open it up to members of the public for comments. You get each 3 minutes if you wish to speak on this item, the Complete Streets Master Plan. So anyone in the audience who wishes to speak, that's your chance to raise your blue hand or just simply unmute and say your name. Okay, going once.
This is John in South Los Altos.
John, go ahead.
Yes, I'm looking at table 8. It's on the page number 147. Proposed prioritization criteria, weighting, and measurements. And I understood that my understanding is this was put together, maybe I'll to put it together from input from maybe this commission, maybe some public or others. But what I'm looking at is that in that prioritization, safety collision reduction comes in at 10% weight. I would think that safety would trump everything else before you even considered any of these other criteria, because that's what we really need to take care of in any enterprise humans undertake, really, is be sure people are as safe as possible. And particularly our pedestrians and bicyclists, that's the job of this commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Any other requests to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna close that part here. And I think, I don't believe there should be a formal vote here. I suppose the commission supports the concept of now forwarding this document to City Council. Is that correct? Do I see any heads opposing this? Yes, do I see support that we can forward this document to City Council? Okay, I see head nodding. I'm gonna say take it as a yes. All right, so Jeff, I think Jaime and Marissa, you have the support to forward the document to City Council.
Thank you, guys.
Chair.
Yes.
If I may make a brief comment, because I know we received a comment from a member of the public, John. We did have a conversation one night about the safety criteria and the ranking, and I think myself and Suzanne and others commented on that. One of the big challenges is a lot of areas that are unsafe don't necessarily have collisions, or
yeah, Stacey, I don't want to reopen up that discussion here. I think
yeah,
you know,
that's fine. I just wanted to make it clear to the member of the public who raised that is we have considered that, and there's complexity around what gets reported and what doesn't get reported. So
yeah, I think I got it. I mean, I think our meetings are all recorded, the public domain recording, and I think everyone's invited to go relook them and then understand the logic behind the thinking. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question, which is that when we forward this to the City Council, does it make sense at the same time to also give them the plan for community input and involvement? Because I would think that's going to be the first question that, or one of the first questions that come up.
Yes, I presume that's part of what we're sending. Actually, that's a good question. So Jaime and Jeff and Marissa, what exactly are we sending to City Council? What documents, in plural, are we sending to City Council?
So I'll try and answer that question. So the draft staff reports that we've already put together for the City Council that will provide the kind of the larger kind of umbrella discussion and overview of the project are already in draft form, kind of circulated around the city. And that already includes a discussion about some of the community outreach that happened for the development of the project. And all the meetings that were happening at the commission, the workshops that we held early in the year for the concept plan line drawings, follow-up meetings we had for projects that have gone into kind of more of a early planning or construction phase for projects that are already built. That's already getting summarized in the city staff report for the City Council. Their attachment will ultimately include the draft plan that you had tonight with probably with an additional summary table of comments that you provided this evening.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer the question, Steve?
It does.
Great, thank you. Great, thanks, Jaime. Very well, so with that, I'm actually gonna...
If it pleases, I just wanted to say thank you so much to this group. This very well could be the last time I engage with you in this setting. So many cities that I've worked with, I get to talk with a steering committee like this twice, 3 times in the whole process. The fact that we've been able to meet monthly, sometimes twice a month for a year, really means that your fingerprints are all in this document. So, you know, my barometer of success is just making sure you feel proud of this at the end of the day. And so we're going to get there. I appreciate all the feedback we received tonight. And along the way, it's been a real pleasure working with you. So thank you.
Thank you. We're not done, by the way, we're not done, but thank you. Yes. Great. So with that, we move to item number 5 on the agenda, which is monthly staff report. Marissa, I presume you're taking the lead.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a couple of announcements. One is Cuesta Drive, which was supposed to be on our agenda tonight. However, we pushed it back, took it off the agenda for tonight, and we will revisit it either at the October meeting. However, it is sort of pressing for certain residents, and so we wanted to see if there was any way that we could talk about it sooner. So I sent out a doodle poll today to all of the commissioners to see if there was any time that we could meet Just
I did not see it.
Okay, I can send it to you again. Did anybody else not see it?
I didn't see it.
Okay. I will check on that and I can send it again if necessary.
Yeah.
So the hope there is
spam. Sometimes the doodle pool goes to spam.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could resend it, it'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I usually try to send it in a email from me as opposed to the automated one from the doodle pool, just for that purpose. So yeah, hoping to potentially find a time to talk about it sooner, just to be sensitive to some of the community members who've expressed a lot of concern. And as we mentioned, let's see, we have another St. Joseph outreach meeting planned for the future. We are conducting parking data counts right now. Those are ongoing this month, both weekday and weekend counts as promised. So we will bring those back to the St. Joseph community in the next couple of months. We also reached out to the school commission to get the plan reviewed there, as we discussed previously. I don't think I have any other updates. Jaime, do you have any?
Jim?
No.
I have one. Although I was going to convey a message from our city clerk, Andrea Chalamingos. Andrea, are you online? I see your photo.
She's signed on, but she's muted.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to announce to the commission of a tentative required training for commissioners. Tentatively, it's October 22nd from 3:30 to 5. So if you could pencil it in on your calendar, Andrea will be following up with the exact proposed date and time.
Okay. And what was the tentative one again?
October 22nd, 3:30 to 5.
We'll wait to see the email from Andrea in that case.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, so with that, we keep going forward with the agenda, commissioners' reports and comments. Anything? VTA, Stacy? Nothing?
We didn't meet this last month, so I don't have too much to report.
All right. Okay, so potential future agenda items. I have a couple in mind based on today's meeting, but I'm gonna let you chime in first. Wow, it's not even 9 o'clock, folks. Come on, we can't just not think about the future. You must have ideas. Let us know. Okay, well, in that case, I am gonna jump in. So I don't know who's gonna take the lead on this one. You, Jaime, or Marissa, or maybe both of you, or Jim, but I think what became clear to me today was that there's a huge gap between what state law is telling us to do and what we may end up having on the ground when it comes to the reality of the parking. And I don't know what the answer is going to look like, especially when I look at First Street, and we've got several projects that are planned on First Street. And if there's call it the shortfall of 4 or 5 parking spots per project, times potentially 4, 5, 6 projects on First Street, that's a lot. That's a lot of parking spots. And I think contrary to what I heard today, we don't have a lot of parking spots in downtown. And the proof to that one is, of course, the comment from the Packard Foundation about their parking lot being filled up now with folks who are not employees there. So I think we're going to quickly realize that we do have an issue with parking. And I don't know what the answer is, whether the answer is going to be issuing permits or, I mean, I understand there's a voluntary encouragement program for folks to kind of abandon their cars. I don't know how successful that's going to be. And I would hate to sort of discover that it's not as successful as we'd like it to be. And so we need to start thinking about what are the mechanisms, what are the tools and knobs we should be putting in place, whether it's perhaps, short-term parking on First Street, so you don't have folks who would park their cars overnight, or perhaps permitting process or something else. But that's something we need to be thinking about. How do we address that issue going forward?
And Chair, if I may add, I would also say this applies to El Camino Real at this point in time.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. Steve, I think you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I think there's a real convergence of parking and also what's happening in terms of demographics with parklets. To the extent that outdoor dining becomes more permanent, and I believe it will become more permanent, that's going to have a major impact on both the density as well as the amount of parking that goes on in that general area, wherever we have restaurants. And I think that we could include that as part of the discussion.
Yeah. Jim, I think, do you have any thoughts on this, or you were just simply just taking notes down?
I was just taking notes as you were addressing stuff. I concur with all of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I know what state law says, and it says 1.5 cars per bedroom. And I think, as a matter of fact, while we were discussing one of the projects here, I looked up some statistics. For Santa Clara County, there are not 1.9 million residents, and collectively they own 1.6 million cars. So for Santa Clara County, it's about 0.9 cars per resident, not per bedroom, per resident. And so I don't know how the math works out to 1.5 cars per bedroom, and somehow we're gonna find our ways short of parking spots.
It seems to me also, when we take a look at the amount of multiple unit developments that are happening, not only in Los Altos, but around Los Altos, that's going to simply exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, so we're not going to solve it here, but I think I thought that would be something, I would love to get, of course, staff to chime in on that one and tell us what can be done and what cannot be done, but that's something that we ought to consider for a higher priority session in the future, agenda item for discussion. And I think, Steve, also you brought up also the parklets. I know, Jim, I know you're working, or at least the city is working on the parklets extension. Is that right? Is there any update on this?
Sure. Yeah. Anthony Carnesecca, I just brain froze on his role, but he's the anyway, Anthony Carnesecca and I are working on a parklet plan that will be a permanent plan, and we're hoping to take that to council in November. And right now we're in the process of hiring a CASP, accessibility expert, to kind of, if we're going to go permanent on this thing, restaurants are going to have to assure that all of the ADA requirements are met for their parklets. And so, so we're working on that now, and we are planning to take a plan to the council, this fall.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. All right. So if there are no further comments from the commission on this, I am ready to adjourn. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one other agenda item that I'd like to see in the future, which is that we have some new digital traffic controls that have gone in over the last 60 days. And I'm thinking of one example being the one at Almond in San Antonio, where we now have bicycle stoplights where we never had them before, that sit right next to a vehicle stoplight. And I would like to hear from staff whether they're doing any monitoring of how those are working out, whether people pay attention to them, whether it creates clarity or confusion, and whether there's a plan to expand it or not expand it to other areas in the city.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, actually, Steve. You know, it's this whole Almond San Antonio intersection is one that I frequent on my bike and in my car and walking. And I think I see it. I see the cycle track working really great. The students really get it. But there's so many violators at that intersection in terms of vehicles. For example, when the do not turn on red, that sort of that light goes on, people don't pay attention. They just make the right turn there on red. Or they go on the green lane. I think we mentioned that last time. So I think that begs the whole question on the enforcement. I don't know how we're gonna have to address that one. Maybe that could be another discussion point for the future. But you know, I see violations frequently in that intersection.
Well, you know, it's what brought it to mind was that my wife and I were driving down San Antonio towards downtown from El Camino, and we stopped at the light, which of course we would always do. And when the bicycle light turned green before the other light did, my wife said, "Oh, the light's green, why aren't you going?" And she never actually looked at it clearly enough to see that there was a bike shape on that sign. So my thought immediately was how many people might misperceive that. So I just think that it's just something to think about and talk about.
Yeah. Jim.
Thank you. Back to parklets. Were you asking it to be an agenda item for CS?
No, I was not. I was only just getting an update. I mean, if you want to agendize it, of course, please do bring it. But I think at this point in time, I'm not asking for it to be.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great evening. And we are adjourning. It's 8:21 p.m. Good night.